What is generally safe but can be fatal if not used correctly? Ink cap mushrooms are edible forageable mushrooms, but if consumed with alcohol they become toxic. One example of why using foraging apps to identify a yes or no answer as to whether something is edible isn't a great idea. In the 1980s, there was a restaurant in Stockton, California, that killed several customers with poisonous mushrooms. The owners/employees went out to the foothills and picked them. You can't do that unless you know what you're doing. Foraging, in general, seems pretty reckless when there are so many varieties of edible mushrooms that look similar to poisonous ones. The good news is that growing your own mushrooms is a super fun hobby and you can get all kinds of safe spores for exotic mushrooms you won't find in stores. All you need is some cheap supplies, a bit of care with sterilization and some spores from a reputable supplier. Drinking water. It also used to be an issue with runners who would drink copious amounts at every aid station in long races. I have a personal experience with this. I didn't actually drink too much at the aid stations, but I drank a ton more than typical the day before the race. I was new to half marathons and figured I knew it all. This was my second half marathon. I made it 8 miles, but the whole time I was just not feeling great. Near the 8-mile mark, I was really out of it. I'd compare it to being pretty drunk, unable to make rational decisions. I ended up starting to walk and was staggering pretty bad. Thankfully some observer on the side came and pulled me to the side and got some medics nearby to come tend to me. I got an ambulance ride to the ER. Took 3+ bags of 4 fluids and drank a bunch of Gatorade-type drinks they kept giving me. I remember at the ER, I knew all of the questions they asked me, except for what year it was. That was frightening in the moment. They did blood work and ultimately said I'd flushed out a lot of my electrolytes. I felt fine after less than an hour in the ER. They kept me about 3 hours to make sure I was okay. If I had ran into this issue while out training where there weren't observers and medics nearby, I could have stumbled off to the side of the road and died. Salt. Sprinkle it on your food and you're fine, but consume 10 teaspoons at once and you could die. My husband has sodium issues because of an immune disorder. He was once in the ICU for 10 days so they could correct his sodium levels. Very serious stuff. The first time he saw his endocrinologist in the ICU, she was surprised he was conscious and said, "Oh, I thought you'd be in a coma." The lethal dose of table salt is roughly 0.5-1 g per kg of body weight. I worked in AS Hospital ER for a few years and we had some teenager brought in for a suicidal gesture who ate a whole pile of Tylenol after getting into an argument with his parents. He felt fine after a day of treatment, but the doctors and nurses got together and determined that he had taken a fatal dose. There wasn't anything to save him short of a liver transplant immediately. There was no compatible liver available. The organ damage was irreversible at that point and he was now in for a slow and painful death. When they broke the news to him and his family, he started screaming that he didn't actually want to die and thought they were wrong, and his father was demanding they do something, anything. They transferred him to a bigger hospital ICU a few hours later where he presumably died. It was heartbreaking. One of the worst experiences I had working there was listening to all this unfold down the hallway at my desk. I had a girlfriend in high school that ate a handful of Tylenol, but thankfully we got her to the ER and they pumped her stomach in time before the pills had time to dissolve and enter her bloodstream. The doctor explained that if we had gotten there even 30 minutes later it would have been catastrophic and possibly like a month long of painful suffering before she would die. I was glad it worked out the way it did. It's funny we broke up and I'm now married to a pharmacist. Electricity. Too much electricity completing a circuit through your heart can cause a heart attack. It's all about quantity and location. You've got a ton of electricity going on in your body right now, and you'd be dead without it, so it actually is not dangerous in general. It's just dangerous in the wrong place/amount, as are most things. Air is dangerous in large quantities in your blood vessels, and blood is dangerous in large quantities inside your lungs, alveolar sacs. Visine. Visine is an extremely toxic poison. If you ingest just a small amount it can be fatal. It's been one of the favorite ways for women to kill their husbands for a very long time. Just a few tablespoons in the morning coffee or oatmeal and a fat life insurance check is on the way. Same goes for antifreeze. Antifreeze nowadays is much harder to poison people with because they started adding a bitter flavor additive. I accidentally got some in my mouth one time, and the bitterness was intense. Ah, didn't know that. I saw it on an episode of Forensic Files one time. This lady kept putting some antifreeze in her husband's Gatorade and poisoned him that way. Apparently it was sweet back in the day and completely blended in with the Gatorade. However, they ran a test on the husband and it came back positive for ethylene glycol. Dead giveaway that he was poisoned. Most drugs. The lethality of drugs is measured as an LD50, a lethal dose for an average population. I find it interesting that many drugs vary so wildly in how they present their effects in relation to their LD50. Some drugs start to work at basically any dose, and those starting doses are miles away from the LD50. Some examples would be caffeine and LSD. LSD, for example, starts causing the desired effect at almost no dose. While 100 mg, 16.5 mg per kilogram of body weight, sources I found listed different amounts, is a lethal dose, and that may sound like a small amount, the effects begin in the microgram range. About 1 to 1.5 micrograms per kilogram you have a standard dose of recreational LSD. Some will take more than that, but that means you would have to take hundreds or thousands of doses to hit toxic effects. Caffeine is similar in most people. With a 150 to 200 milligrams per kilogram LD50. They means take your weight in lbs and divide by 2.2. That is how many Monster Energy drinks you need to consume to hit toxic effects. Alcohol on the other hand. Phew. That stuff only starts working incredibly close to the toxic range. It's a narrow window. 12 grams per kilogram body weight. Tolerance is hard to factor. In 45 milliliters shots that is only about 14 average. Well, the effects of alcohol that many users are seeking is going to be half a lethal dose. With caffeine you are looking for 1 to 2 doses out of 50 to 70 or more. LSD is 1 to 10 out of thousands, and alcohol 6 to 7 out of 14. Tolerance notwithstanding. Crazy, right? Your bathroom. Many people get hurt badly and slip in the bathroom. Oddly enough, we tend to use materials that are rather slick when wet when building them too. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I have a serious respect for slip hazards in the bathroom and for holding the handrails while walking up/down the stairs. Everyone is afraid of snakes, terrorists, axe murderers, but it's much more likely the bathtub or stairs that are going to kill you. Apples. If you eat around 200 of them, including the core, you'll have consumed enough cyanide to be fatal. Eating a whole cherry. This is because cherry pits contain the glycoside amidalin, which, when it enters the stomach, under the influence of the previous juice, forms a strong poison, hydrocyanic acid. 50 cherry pits can kill a person, but 15 is enough for a child. 10 will cause poisoning. Hairspray and any spray that can be used as an impromptu flamethrower in general. Water and bathroom floors. More people are killed or injured in accidents in bathrooms than most people realize. Any corner. The corner of a table or the corner of a cabinet door. Never leave those doors open. It takes one wrong step to lose an eye. Bleach. It's poisonous, it can blind you if it gets in your eyes, and it makes lots of smoke if mixed with brake fluid. Fermentation. Botulism says hi. There's a guy on YouTube that's just waiting for a case of botulism. He's been attempting to make his own booze in his apartment and adding all kinds of ingredients to infuse his recipes. He keeps setting these dates for his recipes to finish fermentation, but he can't help himself and he keeps opening them up and sipping on them well before their due dates. Introducing all kinds of mouth bacteria and what have you, his dental hygiene is very questionable. He also thinks that the yeast packets he's adding are somehow going to just magically turn his mess into alcohol within a couple days. But, he won't listen to people when they tell him that he's risking botulism infection by not being safe and actually learning a few things about the fermentation process. So some people are just watching him and waiting to see if it happens or if he actually successfully brews some sort of alcoholic bacon/banana/fruit juice/chocolate infused beverage. I'm gonna say fentanyl. Used in most hospitals under caution, but do it yourself and well you're probably not gonna survive. There was an interesting series of events at a glass factory. They kept having accidents but they weren't keeping the detail, so they were forced to start keeping accident records. After a month or so, a pattern emerged. The workers were not being hurt by the glass, as you'd expect in a glass factory. No, the majority of accidents were around using Stanley knives. They had proper equipment to handle the glass, but no hand protection when using the knives. Hence, more accidents. Shellac. It's edible and used on fruit and candy at the grocery store at this moment, but if you buy a quart from the hardware store and drink it, I'd have to believe you'd die. Cleaning supplies. Mixing them together can be fatal depending on the chemicals used to make them. Poke. It's a green that grows wild and is eaten pretty regularly in the South. Soaked and boiled properly, it can be eaten like spinach, not prepared properly, and it's poisonous.